It's 3 a.m. A truck stop in the middle of nowhere. No signal, no help, no other cars on the road. Just me, alone. Then the door swung open. No headlights outside. No engine sound. No car pulling up to the pumps. Just boot prints, appearing from nowhere, moving in a straight line, directly toward me. He sat down at the counter, and he looked me dead in the eyes. He knew my name. He knew my wife had left me 6 months ago. He knew my daughter had been crying all week. I never told a single soul any of this, but he knew everything, every detail, every secret, every lie I thought I had buried. Before he left, he placed a $20 bill on the counter. I looked closer. There was blood on the corner. Fresh blood, still warm. He smiled and said, "I'm leaving this for you." I went outside after he left. No footprints in the snow, no tire tracks, no oil on the gravel, nothing, like he was never there at all. But the blood on that bill was still warm in my memory. Story 1. The drifter who knew my name before he even walked in. I'd been working the graveyard shift at the Crossroads truck stop off Interstate 80 in central Nebraska for 15 straight years, and most nights felt like the same endless loop. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, burnt coffee in the air, and the low rumble of semis idling out in the lot. The place sat in the middle of nowhere, flat harvested cornfields stretching for miles in every direction. Rural Midwest emptiness, where cell signal dropped to nothing after dark, and the nearest town with real help was a solid 25 minutes away if you were lucky. My name's Frank, 52, divorced, but not officially yet. And most of the time, I liked the quiet. It gave me space to think about Sarah back in Kearney and our daughter Emily up at college in Lincoln without anyone bothering me. That particular Tuesday in late October was colder than usual, the wind cutting across the plains like it was trying to peel paint off the pumps, and by 3 in the morning the lot was almost empty. Just 2 rigs parked way out back with their drivers sleeping inside, and me alone behind the counter wiping down the same sticky spots I'd cleaned 1,000 times before. The little bell above the door jingled at exactly 3:12 a.m. I looked up expecting one of the sleeping drivers needing diesel or a bathroom key, but instead this tall, lanky guy in a faded denim jacket stepped inside. No semi pulling up first. No headlights sweeping across the windows. Nothing. He didn't grab a drink or head for the snacks. He walked straight to the counter, boots leaving wet prints on the tile from the snow that had started falling, and he looked me dead in the eyes like we'd met before. Before I could even open my mouth, he smiled this thin, knowing smile and said, "How you holding up tonight, Frank? Sarah still making those apple pies on Sundays, or did things change after she packed her bags 6 months ago?"
My stomach turned to ice. I never wore a name tag on the night shift anymore. Corporate policy changed years back after too many weirdos got too friendly. And Sarah leaving? That was private. The papers were still sitting in my glove box, and signed something I hadn't told a single soul at this truck stop or anywhere else on the road. I stared at him, coffee pot frozen in my hand, and managed to choke out,
"Do I know you, man?" He chuckled softly, like I told a joke, and slid onto one of the stools. "Nah, but I know you. Heard you had that bad back from the accident 2 winters ago, the one where you swerved for the deer and rolled into the ditch. Still pops when you reach for the top shelf, doesn't it?" Every detail was exact. Not even my regular drivers knew the real story. I told everyone it was black ice, so the insurance wouldn't dig. My hands started shaking as I poured him a coffee anyway. Black, no sugar. The way he somehow already knew I'd make it if he asked. He kept talking, calm, steady, like we were old buddies catching up at a bar. Told me Emily had called me last week crying about her boyfriend at school. How she wished I'd pick up more often instead of letting it go to voicemail, because I was too tired from the road. That phone call happened. She'd been upset, said she missed the way things used to be before the fights got bad, and I hadn't told anyone. Not even Sarah. The store felt smaller with every word he dropped. I glanced out the big front windows and realized one of the 2 rigs had already fired up and pulled out while we were talking, taillights disappearing into the blowing snow. Now it was just his silhouette and mine reflected in the glass. The plains outside completely black, no other lights for miles, no passing cars, nothing but the wind and the faint crackle of the police scanner that hadn't picked up a signal in hours. My cell phone on the counter showed 0 bars, same as always when the weather turned ugly out here. I tried to keep my voice steady, asked him where he was headed, but he leaned in closer and mentioned the exact color of the curtains Sarah had left behind in our old bedroom, the ones with the tiny blue flowers she picked out the year we got married. The tension kept building slow and thick, like something wrapping around my chest. He wasn't loud or threatening, just too familiar. He knew the fight we had the night she left, the one where I said things I couldn't take back about money and the long hauls keeping me away. He knew the model of the old revolver I kept hidden under the mattress at the apartment I rented after she moved out, the one I bought after a driver got robbed at this very stop 2 summers back. Every new detail landed like a punch I couldn't dodge. I kept glancing at the security cameras blinking red in the corners, wondering if the morning crew would even bother checking the footage, wondering if anyone would believe me when I said a stranger walked in and recited my entire crumbling life like he'd been living it with me. The second rig rumbled to life and left too, its engine fading into the distance until the only sound left was the hum of the drink cooler and my own pulse hammering in my ears. I was completely alone with him now, 20 miles from the nearest sheriff's deputy, no backup, no way to run without him seeing. He finally stood up after what felt like forever, stretched like he had all the time in the world, and dropped a crumpled $5 bill on the counter. "Keep the change, Frank. Tell Emily I said she should call you more, and give Sarah my best on that pie recipe." Then he walked out into the snow without another word. I watched him cross the empty lot to a big sleeper cab parked way out by the exit ramp, one I swore on my life hadn't been there when he first came inside. The engine coughed awake, headlights cutting through the falling flakes, and he pulled away slow and steady, disappearing down the on-ramp like any other driver heading west. My legs felt weak as I locked the door behind him and finally got a single bar of signal to call the non-emergency line. I told the dispatcher everything, voice cracking, but there wasn't much they could do with just a description of a tall guy in a denim jacket who knew too much. By the time the sun came up and the morning shift guy showed up yawning, I went out back to where that rig had been parked. The gravel looked untouched. No tire tracks, no oil drip, no footprints in the fresh snow. Nothing. Like the truck and the man who drove it had never existed at all, swallowed up by the empty Midwest night. I told myself it was the wind or exhaustion, or some long-haul prankster who'd overheard things from other drivers. But weeks later, I still flinch every time that bell rings at 3 in the morning. I still check the lot twice before I pour anyone coffee. And sometimes, when the planes go dead quiet and the signal drops out, I wonder if he's still out there somewhere, driving the loneliest stretches of I-80, carrying pieces of my life he never should have known. He left no trace, but the fear he planted stayed behind, growing in the dark. Every single night, I'm here alone. Story 2. The drifter who knew my son's hospital room number and what the doctor said at 2:47 a.m. I'd only been pulling the overnight shift at the windmill truck stop just off Interstate 29 in northwest Iowa for 9 months. But it already felt like the only place I could breathe without my ex breathing down my neck. My name is Anna, 29. Raising 7-year-old Tyler alone after the divorce turned ugly faster than anyone expected. The stop sat in the middle of nothing but frozen soybean fields and skeletal wind turbines that moaned in the wind like they were in pain. Corporate kept it open 24/7 because the big rigs needed fuel even when the rest of the world shut down. But on nights like that February 1, the place might as well have been on the dark side of the moon. Cell service died the second the temperature dropped below 0. The nearest sheriff's substation was 40 minutes away on clear roads. And the only other soul around at 3 in the morning was usually just me, the humming coolers, and whatever lonely driver decided to park out back for a few hours of sleep. Tyler was in the children's hospital 2 hours south in Omaha after his asthma attack the week before, and every spare minute I had, I was texting the night nurse for updates while trying not to cry behind the counter. The wind was screaming across the lot at 3:03 a.m. when the door burst open hard enough to rattle the cigarette display. No headlights swept the windows first. No diesel engine growled up to the pumps. Just this average-looking guy in his late 40s. Carhartt jacket zipped to the chin, stocking cap pulled low, snow melting off his shoulders like he'd been standing outside in the blizzard for a while. He didn't grab snacks, didn't ask for the key to the showers. He walked straight to the counter, boots leaving perfect wet tracks, and locked eyes with me before I could even say the usual, "Help you with something?" His voice was calm, almost gentle, like he was sorry he had to tell me. "How's Tyler doing tonight, Anna?" That last breathing treatment they gave him at 2:47 still not kicking in the way the doctor hoped. Huh? Dr. Patel said the oxygen sats are hanging at 89 and they might have to intubate if the next round doesn't turn it around. The coffee pot nearly slipped out of my hand. I had been texting the nurse only minutes earlier, but my phone was face down on the counter, screen locked, and I hadn't spoken a word to anyone in the store. Tyler's hospital room number, the exact doctor's name, the precise time, and the exact words from the update I had just read in the family portal. None of that was on any public record. None of it was something a stranger pumping gas would know. My stomach folded in on itself. I tried to play it cool, asked if he needed diesel or lottery tickets, but he just slid onto the stool like we were old friends catching up at a diner. "You told the nurse you'd be there by 7 if the road's cleared. But we both know you can't leave this shift early or corporate docks you the whole night's pay. Tyler's been asking for you, though. Kept saying, Mommy promised she'd read the truck book tonight. Same book you left on his bed when you rushed him to the ER last Tuesday." Every new sentence landed heavier than the last. He knew the color of the stuffed semi-truck Tyler clutched during every attack. He knew the exact argument I'd had with my ex on the phone at 1:15 a.m. The one where my ex threatened to drive up and take Tyler since you clearly can't handle him. He knew I had been hiding extra cash in the lining of my purse to pay the hospital deductible because the insurance fight was still dragging on. Details I had never whispered to another living soul at this truck stop, not even the day shift girl who sometimes covered for me. The lone semi that had been idling out back suddenly fired up and rolled away without its driver ever coming inside, taillights swallowed by the whiteout. Now it was just me and this stranger under the flickering fluorescence, while the wind tried to peel the roof off the building. My phone still showed 0 bars. The security cameras blinked red in the corners, but I knew from past outages they only recorded to a DVR that reset every 48 hours. No one was coming. No one could hear me if I screamed. He kept talking, voice never rising, never threatening, just stating facts like he was reading my private diary out loud. He described the exact pattern of bruises my ex had left on my upper arm 2 months ago, the ones I covered with long sleeves so Tyler wouldn't see. He knew the password I used for the hospital's parent portal, recited the last note I had typed in the questions for doctor section word for word. The store started to feel like a coffin. The heat vents hissed uselessly against the cold seeping under the doors. Every creak of the building made me flinch because I realized there was no way out except past him. He leaned in a little closer and said, "You changed the locks on your apartment last month after he showed up drunk, but you kept the spare key in the same magnetic hide-a-key box under the 3rd flower pot. Tyler's still got that nightlight shaped like a big rig plugged in by his empty bed. He's scared of the dark without you there." My knees went weak. That hide-a-key box was inside my fenced backyard. No one knew about it except me and the landlord. The fear that had been simmering turned into something sharp and icy that crawled up my spine. This wasn't some trucker who overheard gossip. This was someone who had been inside my life, maybe inside my home, while I was stuck here pumping gas for strangers. The isolation pressed down harder with every minute. The blizzard had completely whitewashed the highway. No headlights, no distant glow from the next town, nothing but black fields and wind. The emergency generator kicked on with a cough when the main power flickered, dropping the store into half-light and making the shadows behind the chip aisle look like someone was standing there watching. He finally stood up after what felt like an eternity, stretched like he had all night, and laid a crumpled $10 bill on the counter for the coffee he never touched. "Tell Tyler his mom's doing her best. And maybe call the nurse back. Those sats just dropped again. Oh, and Anna, next time you hide cash in the lining of that purse, make sure the zipper doesn't catch the way it did last week." I almost couldn't get it closed after I looked. He walked out into the storm without looking back. I watched him disappear between 2 snowdrifts. No truck, no footprints leading away that I could see through the driving snow. When the signal finally crawled back at 5:30 a.m., I called the hospital with shaking hands. The nurse told me Tyler's numbers had dipped right around 3:15, just after the drifter left, and they had to increase his oxygen. She also said someone had called the nurse's station at 3:22, using my cell number, asking for an update on Tyler, using my exact security questions. I never made that call. My phone log showed nothing. When I got home at dawn, the spare key was sitting on my kitchen table next to the truck book, even though I had checked the hide-a-key box before leaving for work and it was still there. The police took a report, looked at the blurry security footage of a man in a Carhartt coat, and told me they couldn't do much without plates or a name. I quit the windmill 2 days later and moved Tyler and me to a different state, but every time the wind howls at night, I still check the locks twice. Sometimes I wake up convinced I can hear boots on the porch, and I wonder if the man who knew everything about my son's hospital room is still out there on the loneliest stretches of I-29, waiting for the next night shift parent who thinks they're alone. Story 3. The drifter who knew the exact mile marker where I left my partner bleeding, the model of the tire iron I used, and the lie I told the sheriff the next morning. I'd been stuck behind the counter at the Dakota Plains truck stop off Interstate 94 in eastern North Dakota for almost 4 years, and the job had become my only constant after everything else in my life went to hell. My name is Jeff, 44, twice divorced, no kids that I claim, and I'm the kind of guy who keeps his head down and his mouth shut, because talking gets you noticed. The stop was the usual lonely concrete island in the middle of endless harvested corn stubble, the kind of place where the wind never stops and the horizon just swallows everything. At 3 in the morning in late November, the temperature had dropped to 12 below, the kind of cold that makes the diesel in the pumps thicken and the security cameras fog over. Only 3 rigs were parked out back, all dark and silent, their drivers sacked out in their sleepers. The nearest town with a deputy on duty was 45 minutes away if the roads weren't iced over, and my cell phone had shown 0 bars since midnight when the storm rolled in. I was alone with the humming beer cooler, the smell of old fryer grease, and the guilt I'd been carrying for 3 years like a second shadow. The door didn't even open with the usual jingle. It just pushed in slow and steady at 3:07 a.m., like someone who already knew the lock was broken. No headlights, no engine noise, nothing. This guy stepped inside, mid-50s, average height, plain black jacket, jeans, scuffed work boots, face half hidden under a faded ball cap. He didn't look at the pumps or the snacks. He walked straight to the counter, snow melting off his shoulders in little rivers, and looked me dead in the eyes before I could even ask if he needed fuel. His voice was quiet, almost respectful, the way a doctor gives bad news. "How you holding up tonight, Jeffrey Michael Harlan?" he said. "Still having those nightmares about mile marker 187 on Highway 2? The one where you left Tommy bleeding out in the ditch after that tire iron caught him right behind the ear." My blood turned to slush in my veins. Nobody had called me Jeffrey Michael Harlan in years, not since I changed my last name on the paperwork after the divorce and started using Jeff Riley on my W-2s. Tommy was my old running partner, the guy I'd hauled with for 8 years, until that night 3 summers ago when we got into it over money and pills at a rest area. The tire iron was still buried under the seat of my old Peterbilt at the time. I'd swung it once, hard, after he came at me with a knife. He went down gurgling something about, "Please, man," and I panicked, dragged him into the corn, drove off, and called the sheriff the next morning claiming he'd just disappeared after a fight at a bar in Fargo. I'd sold the truck 2 weeks later and never drove that stretch of Highway 2 again. The case was still open as a missing person. The family put up billboards every year. But this stranger knew the exact mile marker. He knew the make and color of the tire iron, snap-on, 24-inch, red handle, with the chip in the rubber from when I dropped it years before. He knew Tommy's blood type was O positive because he recited the coroner's estimate of how long it took for him to bleed out in the dirt, 43 minutes. According to the time of death, they guessed when they finally found the remains 2 years later after a farmer's dog dug them up. I tried to laugh it off, asked if he wanted coffee or diesel, but my voice cracked like a teenager's. He just pulled up a stool and kept talking, calm as Sunday morning. "You told the deputy you last saw Tommy at the Flying J in Grand Forks," he said. "But we both know you never made it that far. You wiped the iron on your shirt, size large Carhartt, the one with the rip in the left sleeve you never fixed, and tossed it in the tall grass before you drove south on that gravel road. Still got the scar on your right palm where the blood made the grip slip. Every single detail was perfect. The scar was there. I still rubbed it when I was nervous. He knew I'd been sending anonymous money orders to Tommy's widow every Christmas. always from different post offices, so it couldn't be traced. He knew the exact amount, $800, and that I kept the receipts hidden in an old toolbox in my storage unit in Bismarck. He knew I'd checked the missing persons website on my phone just last week, refreshing the page at 2:14 a.m. while the store was empty. My phone was in my pocket the whole time, screen locked, and the only other person who even knew about the storage unit was my ex-wife, who hadn't spoken to me in 18 months. The store felt like it was shrinking around me. One of the 3 rigs out back suddenly fired up and pulled away without anyone coming inside. Its taillights swallowed by the blowing snow so fast, it was like it had never been there. Now there were only 2 left, and the wind was screaming so loud it rattled the glass doors. My phone still showed nothing. No signal, no way to call anyone. The security cameras blinked their little red lights, but I knew the hard drive only kept footage for 72 hours, and the night manager never checked it unless the cache was short. The stranger leaned forward just a little, voice never rising. You still keep the spare key to that storage unit taped under the driver's seat of your current truck, the white Freightliner with the dented bumper from when you backed into the guardrail last winter. Tommy's wedding ring is still in there too, isn't it? The one you took off his finger before you dragged him into the corn so the animals wouldn't find it right away. You told yourself it was insurance, but we both know it's guilt. Every new fact hit like a fist I couldn't block. He described the exact pattern of the blood spatter on my boots that night, the ones I burned in a barrel behind my apartment the next week. He knew the lie I told the sheriff about Tommy owing money to some bikers in Minot. He knew I'd been drinking more since the body was found, that I kept a bottle of wild turkey under the counter right now, 3rd shelf from the left, and that I'd taken 3 pulls already tonight because the date was coming up on the anniversary. The isolation pressed down until I could barely breathe. The 2nd rig rolled out without a sound, leaving only one lone semi far out by the exit ramp, its cab dark. The emergency lights flickered when the wind knocked the power for a second, and in that half-dark I saw the stranger's reflection in the glass behind me. Calm, patient, like he had been waiting years for this moment. He wasn't loud. He wasn't waving a weapon. He was just there, knowing things no living person should know unless they had followed me, watched me, maybe even sat in the passenger seat that night without me ever seeing him. He kept going, voice soft as falling snow. Your new girlfriend, the waitress at the truck stop cafe in Jamestown, she doesn't know any of this, does she? You told her Tommy just ran off with some lot lizard. But I know you still drive past his widow's house every time you head south on I-29, slowing down just enough to see if the porch light is on. And last month when you went back to mile marker 187 at 4 a.m., you left a 6-pack of Bush on the fence post. Nice touch. The sheriff's department has a new detective now, by the way. He reopened the file 2 weeks ago after an anonymous tip. They pulled your old phone records. You might want to check your mailbox when you get home tomorrow. There's a letter from the state crime lab requesting a voluntary DNA swab. They found hair in the corn that doesn't match Tommy. My knees almost gave out. That anonymous tip wasn't me. I had never gone back to the site last month. I'd been too scared. But he described the exact beer brand, the exact fence post, the exact night I had actually driven out there at 3:45 a.m. and sat in my truck crying for an hour before I left the 6-pack. The fear turned into something cold and sharp that crawled up my throat. This wasn't some random drifter. This was someone who had been inside my life for years, maybe riding in the sleeper berth I never checked, maybe paying the night clerks at every stop I ever worked to keep tabs. The last rig out back suddenly started up, headlights cutting through the whiteout, and pulled away slow, leaving the entire lot empty except for the blowing snow and the faint glow of the diesel pumps. It was just me and him now, 20 miles from any help, no cameras that would save me, no one to hear if I ran. He finally stood up after what felt like a lifetime, stretched his shoulders, and laid a single quarter on the counter next to the untouched coffee. "Keep the change, Jeff," he said. "Tell the waitress in Jamestown I said hello. And when the sheriff knocks on your door next week, remember, I was never here, but I'll be watching from the next empty stool, same time, same place, every year on the anniversary, until you decide to do the right thing." Then he walked out into the blizzard without looking back. I watched him disappear between the snowdrifts. No truck, no footprints leading anywhere, just the wind erasing everything. When the signal finally came back at 5:42 a.m., I called the non-emergency line with shaking hands and told them everything. They took the report, reviewed the blurry footage, and said the man in the jacket didn't match any known persons of interest. They also told me a letter had indeed been sent to my old address requesting DNA, something I hadn't even known about yet. I drove straight to the storage unit after my shift. The spare key was still taped under the seat, but Tommy's wedding ring was gone. In its place was a single Polaroid of the cornfield at mile marker 187, taken from the exact spot I had stood last month, with today's date written on the back in my own handwriting. I never took that photo. The police said they couldn't do anything without more evidence. I quit the Dakota Plains 3 days later and moved to a different state under a new name again. But every time I see headlights in my rear view at 3 a.m., I still check the locks twice and wonder if the man who knew the exact weight of the tire iron in my hand is still out there on the loneliest stretches of I-94, waiting for the next night when I think I'm finally alone. He never raised his voice. He never touched me. But the truth he left behind is buried deeper than Tommy ever was, and its growing roots I can feel twisting tighter every single night I close my eyes. Story 4. The drifter who knew the names of all 7 girls I buried, the exact knife I used on each one, and that the blood on the $20 bill he paid with was still warm from the 8th victim I killed before my shift. I had been working the graveyard shift at the Badlands Edge truck stop off Interstate 90 in western South Dakota for 6 long years, and the isolation out there had become the only thing that kept me sane after my second marriage collapsed and my daughter Lisa stopped answering my calls. My name is Carla, 37, the kind of woman who smiles at every driver, pours coffee without spilling a drop, and never lets anyone see the storm behind my eyes. The stop sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but rolling grassland and the occasional barbed wire fence, the kind of place where the wind howled across the plains like it was trying to warn you to leave. At 3 in the morning in mid-December, the temperature had plunged to -18, the kind of cold that made the fuel lines freeze and the security cameras frost over so bad you could barely see the pumps. Only 4 rigs were parked way out back, all of them dark with sleeping drivers who wouldn't stir until dawn. The nearest sheriff's deputy was an hour away on icy roads. My cell phone had shown 0 bars since the storm hit at midnight, and the only company I had was the low drone of the generators and the guilt that had been eating me alive for half a decade. The door didn't jingle when it opened at 3:04 a.m. It just eased inward like someone who already knew the deadbolt was loose from me forgetting to fix it last week. No headlights swept the lot. No diesel engine coughed to life at the pumps. This ordinary-looking man in his early 50s stepped inside, graying hair under a plain black ball cap, worn Carhartt coat, scuffed boots, nothing memorable except the way he moved like he owned the night. He didn't head for the coffee or the beef jerky. He walked straight to the counter, snow melting in tiny rivers off his shoulders, and looked me dead in the eyes before I could even ask if he needed diesel. His voice was soft, almost kind, the way a priest might speak at a funeral. "How you holding up tonight, Carla Marie Thompson?" Still keeping that folding knife in your left jacket pocket, the one with the serrated edge you sharpened yesterday afternoon, because you never know when another girl might need a ride home. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought the counter might shake. Nobody had called me Carla Marie Thompson in years. I had changed my last name after the divorce and used Carla Reed on every paycheck and ID badge. The knife was there right now, pressed against my hip under the apron, the same one I had used on every single one of them. I tried to play it cool, asked if he wanted the key to the showers or maybe some lottery tickets, but my voice came out thin and cracked. He just pulled up a stool like we were old friends and kept talking, calm and steady, reciting facts no living soul on earth should know. Let's start with the first one. Emily Harper, 19, blonde hair and a ponytail, hitchhiking from Rapid City after her shift at the diner. You offered her a ride in your old Civic at 2:47 a.m. on April 12th, 3 years ago. She said, "Thank you, ma'am, you're a lifesaver," right before you pulled off at mile marker 214 and dragged her into the tall grass. Last words were, "Please, I have a little sister." You used the knife across her throat in one clean motion, wiped it on her own scarf, and buried her 6 feet down next to the broken fence post. Still got that silver heart necklace she was wearing? I bet it's in the coffee can under your kitchen sink. Every detail landed like a hammer. Emily Harper, the exact date, the exact mile marker, the exact words she whispered while she was dying. I had never written any of it down, never told a single person, never even spoken the names out loud in my empty apartment. He kept going without pausing for breath, voice never rising, never accusing, just stating the truth like he had been standing right beside me for every single kill. Number 2 was Rachel Klein, 21, dark curls, ran away from her stepdad in Sioux Falls. You found her in the women's bathroom at 1:33 a.m. on August 9th. She begged you to call her mom. You told her sure, honey, and walked her out behind the generator shed instead. Same knife, same motion, buried her at mile marker 209 under the lone cottonwood tree. Number 3, Sarah Delgado, 18, carrying a backpack full of textbooks. She said, I just want to get home for Christmas right before you slit her throat at the edge of the cornfield by exit 212. You kept her student ID in your glove box for 6 months before you burned it. Number 4 was the worst for you, wasn't it? Megan Torres, 17, pregnant, crying about the baby the whole time. You almost stopped halfway through, but you finished anyway and buried her deeper than the others so the coyotes wouldn't dig her up. My knees buckled behind the counter. He knew the exact order, the exact words each girl had gasped out while they bled into the dirt, the exact spots I had chosen because I thought no one would ever look. He knew I had kept little souvenirs from each one, a hair clip, a set of keys, a faded photo, and exactly where I hid them in my storage unit 2 states away. He knew I cleaned the knife in the employee's sink every time, using the same bottle of bleach I kept under the register. The store started to feel like it was closing in around me, the fluorescent lights buzzing louder, the wind outside screaming like all 7 of those girls were trying to get in. One of the 4 rigs out back suddenly roared to life and pulled away without its driver ever coming inside, taillights swallowed by the wide-out blizzard in seconds. Then the second one followed, then the third, until only one lone semi remained far out by the exit ramp, its cab completely dark. My phone still showed nothing, no bars, no way to call for help, no way to warn anyone. The security cameras blinked their useless red eyes in the corners, but I knew the DVR only kept 48 hours and the owner never checked unless money went missing. He leaned in a little closer, voice dropping to almost a whisper, and the real terror began. You think you're safe because no one ever connects the dots. But I know the 8th one too, the girl you killed at 1:45 a.m. tonight before your shift even started. She was hitchhiking from the rest area 10 miles back. Name was Kayla Reynolds, 20, wearing that red hoodie you buried with her body at mile marker 217. You thought you were alone when you dragged her into the corn. You thought you cleaned every drop of blood off your hands. But I was watching, Carla. I've been watching for years. And right now, at 3:37 a.m., your daughter Lisa is driving straight here from Sioux Falls to surprise you. She texted you 20 minutes ago, Mom, I can't wait, ETA 410, bring in your favorite coffee. You already have the plan worked out in your head. You'll walk her to the car, tell her you need to show her something in the field, use the same knife that's still in your pocket right now, duct tape her hands with the roll you keep in the back room, and bury her right next to Megan Torres so the 2 of them can keep each other company. You even practiced the story you'll tell the sheriff. Some drifter must have grabbed her while I was inside. The words hit me harder than any punch ever could. Lisa was really coming. I had seen the text on my phone before signal died. I had sharpened the knife yesterday because the thought of her finding the old Polaroids in my storage unit had been eating at me for weeks. She had called 2 nights ago saying she missed me and wanted to talk about some old pictures she found. I had already decided tonight was the night I had to make sure she never told anyone. The isolation crushed down on me like the entire prairie was pressing on my chest. The last remaining rig out back suddenly fired up, headlights cutting through the driving snow for just a second before it vanished down the on-ramp, leaving the entire lot empty except for the howling wind and the faint glow of the diesel islands. It was just me and him under those flickering lights. No witnesses, no escape. No one who would hear me if I screamed. He knew every thought racing through my head like he had been living inside it. He knew I had already pictured exactly how Lisa's eyes would look when she realized what I was doing. He knew the exact route she was taking, the color of the coat she was wearing, even the song playing on her radio right now. He finally stood up after what felt like hours, stretched his shoulders like a man who had all the time in the world, and laid a single $20 bill on the counter next to the untouched coffee. The bill was still warm, body warm, and when I looked closer, there was a small smear of fresh blood on one corner. Still tacky, the color unmistakable. Keep the change, Carla. This is from Kayla Reynolds' jacket pocket. I took it right after you finished with her tonight. Thought you might want a souvenir from number 8. He walked out into the blizzard without another word. I watched him disappear between the snowdrifts. No truck, no footprints that lasted more than 10 seconds in the wind, nothing. When the signal finally crawled back at 5:51 a.m., I called Lisa with shaking hands, but she never answered. Instead, I got a text from her number at 4:12 a.m. that read, "A nice man at the truck stop just told me everything. I'm turning around. Don't come looking for me." The $20 bill was still on the counter. When I finally worked up the nerve to drive out to mile marker 217 after sunrise, Kayla's body was gone. The hole was empty, the dirt freshly smoothed over, and in its place was another $20 bill with the same blood smear and a note in handwriting that matched mine perfectly. "See you next shift, Mom." I quit the Badlands Edge the same day and moved 3 states away under a new name. But every time I hear a door open at 3 a.m. or see headlights in my rear view on an empty highway, I still check the knife in my pocket and wonder if the man who knew every name, every last word, and every grave I ever dug is still out there on the loneliest stretches of I-90. He never raised his voice. He never touched me. But the blood on that $20 bill is still warm in my memory, and I know one day soon he'll come back to collect the rest of what I owe.